If compounding interest is so easy and so powerful, why doesn't it seem to work? Why doesn't literally everybody get rich? Grab a drink, take a seat, let's talk about it. What's up, y'all? It's Brian. So compounding interest is kind of a big deal. Even Albert Einstein has a famous quote where he says, compounding interest is the eighth wonder of the world. He who understands it earns it. He who doesn't understand it pays it. And there is a lot of truth to that. If you don't understand compounding interest and then you go and rack up your credit card bill, you're going to pay a lot of interest and you will understand that compounding is no joke. Basically, when your money that makes interest makes more money. Let's do potato example. If this axis is my number of potatoes and this axis is time going by, if I plant one potato in my first harvest, I should expect that to become 5 potatoes. So 5. Now, if my potatoes are increasing with simple interest, then every harvest I would gain 5 more potatoes. So first harvest 5, second harvest 10, third harvest 15. You get a linear growth pattern. Now, if my potatoes are compounding, which they do in real life, my first potato becomes 5, and then each of those new potatoes grows 5 more potatoes. So that becomes 25. And then those 25 potatoes grow 5 more, becoming 125 potatoes. So that is the feature that really describes compounding interest, is this curving path that becomes steeper and steeper. And if you're doing this with money, you can see how it's pretty desirable, because on the right side here, it's becoming a vertical line where I'm making money hand over fist the longer I compound my money. Potatoes can compound at a 5 times rate, but unfortunately we cannot do that with our money. Cash, we can compound at a 10% rate, and that doesn't sound very good when you're comparing it to 5 times, but 10% per year is really good, and that is what the S&P 500 has averaged for the last 100 years. I'm gonna pull up a graph of the S&P 500 right here, and we can see the iconic compounding curve of the S&P 500. Over the last decade, if you invested, you averaged 10% per year. If you invested $200 in 1985, it would become about $6,000 today, which is pretty amazing. Now, why does the economy compound like this? Well, there's 2 factors. First of all, the US population continues to go up. I made a graph right here that shows the US population since 1610. And once again, we can see the iconic compounding curve. Our population has been compounding, except in 2000, it has been slowing down. So we're not compounding our population anymore, but that's not the only way that we're able to compound our profits from our economy. We're also getting more productive. Each worker is getting more done. So I've also found a graph that shows worker productivity since 1955, and it has gone up on average every year as well. More workers getting more work done means that the US economy is going to be compounding its profits. So it's possible, it's reasonable, it makes sense that we should be able to harness compounding to make more and more money. So why aren't we all getting rich? This graph shows what my portfolio would be if I invested $100 and then just let it grow at 10% per year with compounding. On the right side of the graph, the graph is starting to go vertical. If I can just get here, then I should be getting rich incredibly fast. But the problem is, this is a matter of perspective. I feel like eventually I'll be on this side of the graph and I'll feel like I'm making more and more money. But the problem is my perspective is always on this side of the graph. I always feel like I'm just making a small amount, because every year I'm only making 10%. If I were to change my starting amount from 100 to the ending amount of 10,000, the graph still looks the exact same. I'm still making very little money at first, and then on the right side of the graph, it looks like, oh, I'm going vertical. I'm about to just be making millions of dollars every year if I can just get to this point. But from my perspective, I'm never getting to that point. And that's part of what makes compounding so difficult, because it takes so long and you never feel like you're making more and more money. This graph, by the way, is over a 50-year period. So over 50 years, if I start with $10,000, then yeah, I'm gonna make over $1 million eventually, but I have to wait 50 years. It never feels like I'm making more money. And what makes it even more difficult to stick with it is the fact that the market isn't just smoothly, predictably going up every single year. There's going to be periods of 10 years where I'm actually losing money in the stock market, and that makes it incredibly difficult to stick with compounding. If I go back to the S&P 500, I can see If I started investing right here in 1997, and then I sold everything here in 2009, that's 12 years where if I put $10,000, I would take less money out after 12 years. So the constant ups and downs of the stock market really add to the fact that it's hard to stick with it. And sure, I can see this graph and say, like, in hindsight, why would I sell in 2009 when the market's about to make tons and tons of money? Well, you don't know that. At the moment, the market looks more like this. It looks like I'm on a cliff and I'm free falling, and I need to sell my life savings now to stop myself from losing another 50%, because at this point I've lost half my money. But if I sold, the market turns around, and by the time I buy back in, I might be buying back in for more than what I sold it for, and I've already screwed up a lot of the gains that I would have received from compounding. The next thing that makes it so difficult to get rich from compounding is the fact that there's not just good compounding forces in the universe. There's also evil compounding forces. I'm talking about inflation. Inflation is working against me, and it's compounding every single year. I made a graph that shows somebody who saved $100 every single month for 40 years, and then starting at the age, we'll say they're 60 years old, after 40 years of investing, they start withdrawing 50 grand per year to live off of. So this person started with nothing, invested $100 per month, and they made it up to 500 grand. So they made this plan when they were 20, and they stuck to it for 40 years, and they think, like, I'm gonna have enough money now, but they didn't account for inflation, because 50 grand today, if I started this plan today, in 40 years, 50 grand is gonna be worth very little. If I do the calculation for a 3% inflation rate, this has been roughly the average inflation, then 50 grand would need to be 163 grand to have the same buying power in 40 years. So now I'm not able to survive for 20 years of spending. Now I'm running out of money in just 4 years because inflation has taken the target that I was shooting for and it moved it. So not only do I have to weather the storm of ups and downs in the market, not only do I always have the perspective of being on the left side of the graph, moving very slowly, I also have to hit this moving target. Otherwise, in 40 years, my money is not going to go very far at all. I never actually got to enjoy the vertical right-hand side of the curve where I start making millions of dollars. I have to start spending my money, and then the money that I spend doesn't go as far as I thought it would when I started. So with all of this, with all the difficulties in mind, what's the point? Why even bother trying to get rich from compounding? The sad truth is that no matter what I do, compounding is always going to be working against me. Albert Einstein was not wrong. You will pay for compounding, whether you play the game or not, because inflation is not going to stop. Inflation is going to be eating away at our money year after year. So the best path forward is to harness the compounding that we can to make as much money as possible. And that's why it is so important to optimize our investing, because if I put my money in the wrong investment account, and I end up having to pay 10%, 20%, 30% of that in taxes, that can eat up a lot of the gains that I needed to outpace inflation. If I'm putting my money in the wrong investment funds, if I'm making bad investments, that can set me back years and years. And if I'm investing too much or not enough, that can also set me back many years. So if you want to make sure that you're not leaving tens of thousands of dollars or even hundreds of thousands of dollars on the table in taxes by putting your money in the Roth when you should be putting it in a traditional, check out this video right here. Cheers. It's a good one. Colonel E.H. Taylor.